First contact and the unthinkable challenge for 15,000 galactic cycles. The name Drachneri had meant one thing across 8 star systems: absolute terror. They were giants among the stars, standing 12 feet tall with crystalline scales that could deflect energy weapons and claws that could tear through starship hulls. Their telepathic abilities allowed them to coordinate attacks with devastating precision, and their natural armor made them nearly invulnerable to conventional weapons. No species had ever successfully resisted them. The Althari had tried with their advanced technology and lasted 3 days. The warrior race of Corvin Prime had fought with legendary ferocity and fell in 2 weeks. The peaceful Zenithians had surrendered immediately and served as translators for the next conquests. This was the natural order of things in the galaxy, and Captain Vextar of the Drachneri Empire had never questioned it. As his scouting vessel, the Dread Talon, drifted through the outer rim of an unremarkable star system, Vextar felt the familiar satisfaction of another routine mission. His orders were simple: identify habitable worlds, catalog intelligent life, and determine the best methods for subjugation. It was work he had done hundreds of times across dozens of systems. The third planet from the yellow star caught his attention immediately. Blue and green, covered in water and vegetation, with clear signs of technological civilization. The energy signatures were primitive, barely achieving basic spaceflight, perfect for what the High Command had in mind. Scanner Officer HFY Vextar rumbled, his voice carrying the harmonic undertones that marked all Drachneri speech. Analysis of the target world. HFY's claws danced across the scanning array, pulling up detailed readouts. Captain, the planet shows extensive civilization. Population approximately 8 billion. They call themselves humans, according to their primitive radio transmissions. Technology level suggests they have achieved nuclear fission and basic chemical propulsion. No energy shields detected. No plasma weapons. They appear to use kinetic projectiles for warfare. Vextar's mandibles clicked in amusement. Kinetic weapons against Drachneri armor was like throwing pebbles at a mountain. Physical characteristics: bipedal mammals, averaging 1.8 meters in height. Soft tissue construction with minimal natural armor. They appear to have thin skin that tears easily and bones that break under moderate pressure. Most curious, Captain, they seem to fight among themselves constantly, over resources, territory, and abstract concepts they call beliefs. This drew genuine laughter from the bridge crew. A species that couldn't even achieve unity among its own kind would pose no challenge whatsoever. Vextar made his decision quickly, signaled the High Command. We have found our demonstration world. The humans will serve as an example to the remaining free systems of what happens to those who might consider resistance. Prepare the subjugation protocols. The message that reached Drachneri High Command 3 days later was met with enthusiastic approval. The Empire had been dealing with increasing whispers of rebellion among their slave species. Several worlds had been slow to meet tribute quotas, and intelligence suggested that resistance cells were forming in the outer territories. A fresh conquest, broadcast across all communication networks, would remind the galaxy why the Drachneri ruled. Admiral Krexener himself authorized the mission. Make it spectacular, he commanded. Land in view of their major population centers. Demonstrate our superiority clearly. Break their strongest warriors publicly. Let every species in the galaxy see what happens to those who dream of freedom. 12 days after first contact, 3 Drachneri assault craft descended through Earth's atmosphere. Their destination was a human military installation in the desert region they called Nevada. Intelligence suggested This was where the humans trained their elite warriors. Breaking them here would demoralize the entire species. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos had been running combat drills when the impossible shapes appeared in the clear Nevada sky. 20 years of military service, including tours in the harshest conflicts. Earth hadn't prepared her for this moment. The craft were unlike anything human technology could produce, moving with fluid grace despite their massive size. As base alarms shrieked across the installation, Maria gathered her squad. These were hardened soldiers, veterans of special operations, who had seen the worst humanity could do to itself. But as the alien craft settled on the desert floor with ground-shaking thuds, she saw something she had never witnessed before in her people. True fear. Listen up, she called to her 12-person team, her voice cutting through the chaos. We don't know what they want, but we're going to show them what humans are made of. Weapons ready, but nobody fires without my command. We're soldiers, not scared children. The craft's ramps lowered with hydraulic hisses, and the beings that emerged defied everything humans thought they knew about life in the universe. The Drachnary warriors stood like moving mountains, their crystalline scales catching the desert sun and throwing it back in prismatic flashes. Their eyes, deep purple and multifaceted, surveyed the human base with obvious contempt. Captain Vex led the group, his ceremonial armor marking him as their leader. He had chosen 12 of his finest warriors for this demonstration. They carried no weapons because none would be needed. The plan was simple. Demand surrender, execute any who resisted, and broadcast the footage to every corner of the galaxy. As the Drachnary approached the main gate, human soldiers took defensive positions behind concrete barriers and armored vehicles. Maria could see the fear in their eyes, could feel it radiating from every man and woman on the base. These aliens were death given form, and everyone present knew it. Humans, Vextar's voice boomed across the base, amplified by translation devices. I am Captain Vextar of the Drachnary Empire. Your species has been selected for subjugation. Kneel before your new masters, and your deaths will be swift. Resist, and we will make your suffering legendary. The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. Maria could hear her own heartbeat, could smell the fierce sweat of her squad. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, to surrender and hope for mercy. But deeper than instinct, older than fear, something else stirred in her chest. It was the same thing that had driven humans to cross oceans in wooden ships, to climb impossible mountains, to reach for distant stars despite every rational argument against it. Maria Santos stepped forward. She was a small woman by human standards, barely 5.5 feet tall, weighing perhaps 140 pounds. Her desert camouflage uniform was standard issue, her equipment unremarkable. Compared to the crystalline giant before her, she was less than an insect. But she looked up at Captain Vextar with steady brown eyes and spoke in a clear, carrying voice. No, the word hung in the desert air like a thrown gauntlet. Vextar's multifaceted eyes focused on this tiny creature that dared speak to him. Around the base, human soldiers held their breath. In the Drachnary ranks, several warriors shifted with what might have been confusion. You refuse, Vextar rumbled, his harmonic voice carrying notes of disbelief. You, small thing, refuse the command of the Drachnary Empire. Maria never broke eye contact. I said no. You want this planet, you'll have to take it. And that means going through us. What happened next would be analyzed by military strategists for generations, debated by philosophers, and passed down in legend by storytellers across 1,000 worlds. Vextar, commander of the most feared military force in the galaxy, raised one massive claw and brought it down toward the insolent human who dared defy him. Maria moved 20 years of combat experience compressed into a single moment of perfect action. She sidestepped the descending claw, grabbed the alien's wrist with both hands, and used his own momentum to redirect the strike. Physics, leverage, and timing combined as Maria executed a perfect hip throw, sending the 12-foot Draknari captain crashing to the desert floor. The sound of his impact echoed across the base like thunder. For a heartbeat, the universe stood still. Human soldiers stared in disbelief. Draknari warriors froze in shock. Captain Vexter, who had never been knocked down by anything in his 300-year life, lay sprawled in the Nevada sand with a human boot planted firmly on his armored chest. "Like I said," Maria announced, her voice carrying across the sudden silence. "You want our world? Come and take it." That single moment changed everything. The footage, captured by base security cameras and somehow leaked onto galactic communication networks despite Draknari jamming attempts, spread like wildfire across the stars. Species that had cowered in slavery for millennia saw something they had never dared. Imagine a Draknari warrior defeated by a creature 1/10 his size. The warrior races whispered of hope, the enslaved spoke of freedom, and in the darkest corners of the galaxy, beings who had forgotten how to dream began to remember. On Earth, humanity began to prepare for war. The war that changed everything, the aftermath of the Nevada incident sent shockwaves through both human and Draknari leadership. Within hours of the footage leaking, every major government on Earth received the same message through channels they didn't know existed: submit immediately or face total annihilation. President Catherine Walsh stood in the emergency session of the United Nations, addressing representatives from every nation on Earth. The usual political divisions that had plagued humanity for centuries evaporated in the face of existential threat. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to propose. "3 days ago, we learned we are not alone in the universe. We also learned that our neighbors are not friendly. The Draknari Empire has given us 72 hours to surrender unconditionally or face what they call cleansing protocols." She paused, looking around the assembly hall at faces representing 8 billion human souls. "I propose we give them our answer in the only language bullies understand. We fight." The vote was unanimous. Dr. James Chen had been a xenobiologist, studying theoretical alien life when aliens became very real and very immediate. Now he found himself leading a crash program to analyze every second of available footage of the Draknari. His team worked around the clock, dissecting the physiology, movement patterns, and apparent weaknesses of humanity's new enemy. Their armor is their strength and their weakness, he explained to the assembled military leaders in a bunker deep beneath the Pentagon. Those crystalline scales can deflect energy weapons and resist kinetic impact, but they're rigid. They limit flexibility and reaction time. That's how Sergeant Santos was able to throw their captain. General Patricia Morrison, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, leaned forward. "What else? They're used to enemies who either surrender immediately or fight in predictable patterns. Every species they've conquered has tried to match them strength. For strength, we can't do that and win, but we don't have to." Dr. Chen pulled up tactical displays showing human military doctrine adapted for asymmetric warfare. "We've been fighting guerrilla wars for thousands of years. Hit and run, ambush tactics, psychological warfare. They're expecting medieval combat. We're going to give them Vietnam. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos, now promoted to Lieutenant Colonel, and placed in charge of the newly formed Asymmetric Warfare Division, stood before 500 of Earth's best Special Operations soldiers. They called themselves the Terran Resistance, though officially they were Special Operations Commandeli Insoka. You've all seen the footage, she addressed her troops. You know what we're up against. 12-foot crystalline monsters who can read minds and have never lost a war. They think we're going to line up in neat rows and let them slaughter us like every other species they've conquered. She smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. They're about to learn what humans do to overconfident bullies. The Drachnary response was everything Admiral Krexner had promised, overwhelming and spectacular. 500 warships, the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history, approached Earth's solar system. Their intention was not merely conquest, but complete domination. Earth would burn, its population scattered to the slave worlds, and the recordings would ensure no other species ever considered resistance. But as the Drachnary Armada crossed into the outer solar system, they encountered something they hadn't expected. Humans who weren't where they were supposed to be. Major cities had been evacuated. Military installations were abandoned or converted to decoys. The planet's population had vanished into underground networks, natural cave systems, and hardened bunkers that had been secretly constructed during the 3-month preparation period. Where are they? Admiral Krexner demanded as his scanners showed empty cities and lifeless bases. 8 billion humans do not simply disappear. He got his answer when the first asteroid exploded. Humans had spent 3 months hollowing out rocks in the asteroid belt, filling them with nuclear weapons and primitive guidance systems. When the Drachnary fleet passed through what should have been empty space, dozens of asteroids suddenly changed course and detonated. The crystalline shields that made Drachnary ships invulnerable to energy weapons had never been tested against nuclear fire at point-blank range. 17 vessels were destroyed outright, and 40 more suffered critical damage. Impossible. Admiral Krexner snarled as his flagship shuddered under impacts. Primitive species do not employ such tactics. His tactical officer, Commander Dexville, studied the attack patterns with growing unease. Admiral, this was not random. They knew. Our approach, vector. They knew exactly where to place their weapons. Before Krexner could respond, the second wave began. What the humans called Operation Swarmer involved every space-capable vessel Earth could launch. Cargo ships, research satellites, space station modules, and hastily converted civilian craft. None of them were warships, but they didn't need to. They carried kinetic impactors, conventional explosives, and most importantly, small teams of humans who had spent 3 months learning to fight in zero gravity. Lieutenant Colonel Santos led the assault from a converted mining vessel, her team armed with weapons designed specifically for fighting armored aliens in space. As her ship approached a Drachnary dreadnought, she activated the communication system. Admiral Krexner. She broadcast on all frequencies. This is Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos of the Terran Resistance. You came here expecting to fight primitives. Instead, you're about to learn why humans are the apex predators of Earth. The boarding action that followed became the stuff of legend. Human soldiers, using mag boots and maneuvering thrusters, swarmed over Drachnary vessels like antibodies attacking a virus. They cut through hull plating with improvised plasma torches, infiltrated ships through maintenance ports too small for Drachnary use, and fought with a ferocity that stunned their enemies. Inside the ships, human advantages became clear. The Drachnary were powerful but inflexible. Their armor, designed for direct confrontation, made them clumsy in tight spaces. Their telepathic coordination, effective for large-scale battles, became a liability when humans used psychological warfare and unpredictable tactics. Maria's team fought their way to the Dreadnought's bridge, leaving a trail of defeated Drakneri in their wake. When she finally faced Admiral Krexener himself, the ancient warrior stood nearly twice her height and outweighed her by hundreds of pounds. "You fight without honor," he rumbled, raising his ceremonial war claws, like vermin in the walls. Maria checked her weapons and smiled. "Honor is a luxury, Admiral. We're just trying to survive." The duel was brief and decisive. Krexener fought, as his people always had, directly, powerfully, and predictably. Maria fought as humans had learned to fight over millennia of warfare, intelligently, adaptively, and without mercy. When it ended, the admiral of the Drakneri fleet lay defeated on his own bridge, and Maria Santos was broadcasting surrender demands to the remaining ships. But the real victory wasn't won in space. It was won in the hearts and minds of every enslaved species watching the broadcasts. For the first time in 15,000 years, the Drakneri were retreating. The seemingly invincible empire was falling. Back before a species they had dismissed as primitive animals. The rebellion began immediately. On Al-3 Prime, scientists who had labored in Drakneri weapons factories seized control of their facilities. The warrior clans of Corvin declared their independence and began hunting down occupation forces. Even the peaceful Zenithians found their courage and refused to translate any more surrender demands. Within 6 months, the Drakneri Empire lost 17 star systems. Within a year, their territory had been reduced to their home system and 3 heavily fortified fortress worlds. The most powerful military force in galactic history had been shattered, not by superior weapons or larger armies, but by an idea that freedom was worth fighting for, no matter the odds. Maria Santos, now General Santos, an unofficial leader of the Galactic Liberation Alliance, stood on the observation deck of humanity's first interstellar vessel. Around Earth, ships from a dozen worlds waited in formation. Former slaves had become allies, united by their shared experience of Drakneri oppression and inspired by humanity's example. General, her aide, Commander Thompson, approached with the latest intelligence reports. The Drakneri are requesting formal peace negotiations. They're offering to recognize the independence of all rebelling systems in exchange for guaranteed safety for their remaining territory. Maria nodded, but her expression remained thoughtful. In her hands, she held letters from children across the galaxy, written in dozens of languages and species, but all saying the same thing. "Thank you for showing us that monsters can be beaten. Set up the meeting," she said finally, "but make sure they understand the terms. This isn't a negotiation between equals. This is a defeated empire accepting the consequences of 15,000 years of tyranny." As she spoke, she could see Earth in the distance, blue and green and beautiful. 3 years ago, it had been an unknown world on the galactic rim. Now it was the symbol of hope for countless species, the proof that courage and determination could overcome any advantage. The Drakneri had been wrong about many things, but their greatest mistake was assuming that strength was the only thing that mattered in the universe. They had never encountered a species that fought not just for survival, but for principles. They had never faced an enemy that got stronger when pushed to the brink. They had never fought. Humans, the galaxy would never be the same.